Okay, hi everybody. Thank you so much for having me today. Thanks, Gavin, for introducing me. I thought I would give a bit of an introduction to myself just so that you understand who I am and why I was asked to speak. So my name's Nicole Benbow. I grew up in Hanover, Ontario. I'm the oldest of 3 kids, and I grew up in a non-Christian family. I ended up accepting Christ at J.R. Pitch, which some of you may be familiar with, because Gavin was the forerunner of that for many years. And that was through the Hanover Missionary Church. And then when I was a preteen, my mom and then my siblings started attending church as well. I went to school first at the University of Guelph for 1 year, and then I transferred to Redeemer University, which is where I now work. And I earned a BA in history with a minor in theater. I met Randall, my husband, at Redeemer. He was a bit older than me. So he graduated, went on to start his MDiv at Tyndale in Toronto. I graduated, we got married, we moved here to Kitchener so that I could pursue my master's at the University of Waterloo. So I got an MA in history at the University of Waterloo. Randall got his MDiv at Tyndale, and we stayed in this area. We have 3 kids right now who are currently 11, 9, and 5. And we moved to Plattsville in 2017 to buy our first house. Randall was a pastor at Country Hills Church in Kitchener for many years, and we started attending Plattsville Church in 2021. So that's kind of what's brought us here. And I'm going to go back to my job a little bit because that's why I think I was asked, or at least that's kind of what I do in my everyday work. It makes me think about some of these subjects a lot, the subjects I'm going to talk about today. So I have taught history as an adjunct professor at Redeemer since 2012, so adjunct being part-time. And then in 2020, when I was coming off of my last mat leave, I started working full-time at Redeemer in a staff role. And I've moved around to a bunch of different jobs in the last couple of years, but this September, I just started a new role as Director of Teaching and Learning at Redeemer University. So my job right now is to help professors in the university become better teachers by providing training, resources, and support about how to connect, how to teach, and what that means. So I really work closely with faculty to create engaging, effective courses using new and innovative, quote-unquote, innovative teaching tools. And I continue to teach 1 to 2 courses a year where my specialty is Canadian history. So this background means that I'm thinking a lot right now about what the reality of teaching students who are 18 to 25 is and how to best connect with them, and some of the things that we've been doing that are not working, and some of the things that are facing this generation and really impacting kids these ages, and a big part of my life as someone who's teaching them right now. There's a really incredibly significant challenge of declining mental health in this age group, and this poses a lot of issues, one of which is getting students eager to participate and engage in learning, because when you're struggling with mental health, it's hard to want to engage, right? Because my role is rooted in supporting faculty to be better teachers, I've been doing a lot of reading and learning about these trends over the past year, and I've been reading more books on the subject of mental health, attention, student engagement, etc. So, I was going to get the clicker, Gavin, I forgot. Maybe if you pass it to me, then I can not have to talk to Lockie every 30 seconds or so. I have a lot of slides. I feel like it'll help you stay engaged if you have things to look at. So, one book that I would recommend to everyone on this subject, is this one. Maybe I'll shift a bit so I can see better. So, has anybody read this book or heard of it? A couple? Some people who I've talked to about it have read it. Great. So this is a book that I highly recommend. It's called The Anxious Generation. And I found, it's by Jonathan Haidt, who, it's not a Christian author, but I did find this praise written by Russell Moore, who's the current editor-in-chief of Christianity Today. So, This book poses a challenge that will determine the shape of the rest of the century. Jonathan Haidt shows us how we've arrived at this point of crisis with technology and the next generation. This book does not merely stand athwart of the iPhone yelling, "Stop." Haidt provides research-tested yet practical counsel for parents, communities, houses of worship, governments, about how things could be different. I plan to give this book to as many people as I can while praying that we all have the wisdom to ponder and then to act. So the research in this book has already impacted my parenting a fair bit in the last 6 months, or at least I hope it has. You have to ask my kids, I guess, if they can see a difference. But a lot of the information that's coming out is that we can do things differently with young kids, especially to try to stop some of the really negative impacts that screens and social media are having on kids and mental health. Generation Z, sounds weird to say Z, but we are in Canada. Generation Z is struggling. Not everyone and not with everything. There are obviously many, many qualities and amazing things that this generation are bringing. But they have really been seriously impacted by being the first generation to grow up with smartphones. That's just had a big impact. So as I'm thinking about these things in my job, about teenagers and young adults, I can't help but think about how these same trends are affecting older people too. Right? We're really focused on how it's affecting younger people. And certainly when your brain is developing and you're spending so much time on a phone or with so much information, that's going to have an impact. But we are not immune, right? If you're older and spending a lot of time on your phone or a lot of time with information, that is still going to have a big impact on you as well. So I started to really think about how we should be discussing this as far as the impact it's having on everybody and not just Gen Z. And I want to say, as a disclaimer, I'm not a technophobe. I love tech. I love seeing what it can do. I encourage my faculty every day to encourage tech more into their teaching because there's great ways to use tech. I just had a conversation about ChatGPT with somebody before service today, and I actually am a fairly big fan of it and use it a fair bit with all the caveats. With the understanding that AI is here to stay and we really can't, we can tell students not to use it and that doesn't really work. So maybe we should just talk about how to use it right, correctly, telling people you're using it, etc. Anyways, this sermon isn't about AI. And cheating is bad. So I'll just say that. Cheating is bad. Don't use AI and then say you didn't. But I think we need to approach all these things with caution, wisdom, and if you're a Christian, a biblically rooted approach. So that's my kind of intro as to what I'm talking about and why I'm talking about it. So right now, we live in a world of overload. Anxiety is something that people have been wrestling with during all times of history. But I want to propose that right now, there are two major causes to blame for the increase in anxiety that we're seeing culturally. One is information overload. We just have too much information everywhere, all the time. And the second is social media. So I'm going to talk about information overload first. I want to think about what types of information we are all surrounded by every day in our daily lives. So I don't know how much of this you can see. This is people's screenshots, people in the church who I asked to send screenshots to me of things that popped up on their phones this week of different information that they were given. So things that were kind of popped up on their social media feeds as this is true, this is something you should know about, this is important, this is factual. So I want you to look at these screenshots and consider what's the type of information that you see every day. What are you reading? What are you surrounded by? How does it impact your thoughts, your emotions, your sense of peace, your contentment, your gratitude? And while you're thinking about that, I want you to actually tell me what you're thinking. So now we're going to do something really, really crazy. So this is called a Mentimeter. This is something I make my students do all the time so that they can wake up when they're sitting in front of me, staring at me. So what you need to do is take out your phones, if you have them with you. If you don't, that's totally fine. And you need to scan this QR code. Or you can go to menti.com on your browser and type in the code, type in the number. Good job, Lucky. So just leave it there for a minute. So what this is going to be is an interactive poll. So you are actually going to be able to engage with it and answer the questions, and then your answers are going to pop up, anonymized. So we're going to see what people in this church think about some of these subjects. So I'll just give you a minute to get logged in. Has anybody used a Mentimeter before? Yes. Yes. Is that QR code small? Can you go back? Lucky, can you? He has to switch it back to ProPresenter, so we'll see if he can. Yep, perfect. All right, just get that one going, and then we'll switch back into the browser. Wonderful. So, let's stand for this so I can... Okay, Lucky, do you want to go back into the Mentimeter now? Okay, so I have just a couple of quick questions, thoughts on information overload, social media, and peace in this day and age, how people in this church are feeling. So if you want to go to the first, so here's the first one. So you should have this up on your phones now that we've activated it up here. So you should be able to put in words that you think of when you think of the internet or social media, and it's going to create a big word cloud. So if you write rude or inappropriate things, it will pop up on the screen. That's what often happens when I'm teaching, because that's funny when you're 18. Anything you type into your phone is going to pop up when you put it on the word cloud. Okay, so just give that a minute and people can say what they think about with the internet or social media. So the way a word cloud works is that if more than one person types in the same word, it gets bigger. Okay, so the words that we see up there that are bigger, that means there's been multiple people that have said that same word, which is why it's getting bigger. So fake, informative, addicting, death scroll, selfies, what is it? Nice. Dirt bikes. Yeah. Thanks, Eli. Confusing, dangerous, too much garbage, clickbait, influencer, distraction, memes. Am I on that? Awesome, good. Okay, let's go to the next one. Thank you. So the next one, this is a ranking. So what I want you to do is rank which of those statements makes you feel the most overwhelmed in today's world. So the constant stream of news, social media comparisons, the pressure to respond to people immediately. So this is not just social media or just information. We're talking about kind of the impact of us all having screens in our pockets all the time. Fear of missing out, too much information to process at once. So what are the highest pressures that you're finding from that having a phone in your pocket all the time? So fear of missing out is ranking as number one. So people feel that that's a huge pressure. They don't want to miss out, and that's why they stay connected. Too much information to process at once. It's also rising to the top. There's just so much input all the time. Agreed. Okay, let's do the next one. And we're getting some likes. Great. What types of notifications do you find most distracting? So some people have all the notifications turned on. Some people have none. Some people just have their email. Probably most people have their texts in their phone so that you will get a ringing sound when your phone rings or your texts come through. What do you find most distracting as far as the types of notifications that you are getting on your phone? App updates, social media alerts, text messages. Awesome. That's interesting. Okay, can you do the last one, Lockie? And what makes it hardest to unplug? So to actually say, I'm going to take this day off, or I'm going to shut my phone down at 7 p.m. and be done with it. Or we're going to have a week off of screens. I mean, some of the stuff I read suggests that, which seems wild. Seems like a lot to do in this day and age. So habit or addiction to screens, work or family responsibilities, lack of alternative activities. So for a lot of people here, we feel like it's a habit, right? We're just used to it, definitely. I would completely agree that I feel the same way. Okay, we're going to go back. I can't remember if I have one more, but let's not do the last one if I do have one more. Let's go back. I know, it's super fun. We can play that at home if you want. Okay, so you go back to my slide, or my next slide. Okay, so here is a definition of information overload. That's what I'm going to talk about first. Information overload is an excessive amount of information that the receiver can no longer process efficiently without distraction, stress, increased errors, or other costs that reduce the efficient use of information. So we are just taking in so much, and it's not all bad. In fact, a lot of the information we take in every day is great. But the amount of emails, the amount of text, the amount of articles, the amount of just stuff that we get and we have to process all day long, our brains are not really equipped to deal with that much, and that's part of the sense of overwhelm and anxiety that is really pervasive in our society right now. A 2012 study, next slide. Oh, I'm doing it. A 2012 study suggests, 2012, so that's 12 years ago, suggests that the amount of information that was created between the beginning of human civilization and the year 2003 is equivalent to the amount of information that is now created every 2 days. And that was in 2012. So imagine what it is now. Like just the amount of stuff that people are writing and putting out there. It's just hugely, hugely different now. Okay? And since 2010, the total amount of captured and accessible data has rapidly increased. Oh, I meant to figure out what a zettabyte was to be able to speak about that intelligently. I don't really know. Does anybody know what a zettabyte is? Can anybody tell me what that is? A super gigantic amount of data. Like, I believe it was like in the billions. So in 2020, 60 zettabytes of data was what was out there. And by 2025, they're expecting it to be 160 to 180 zettabytes of data. So just like massive, incomprehensible amounts of data exist on all of the, internet, cloud-based network devices in the world. It's crazy. So, Jean Twenge, she is a great author who has written a couple of really good books on these types of subjects. She wrote a book called Generations, and in that book, she talks about the different generations, starting from the silent generation, then goes to the boomers, talks about Gen X, then millennials, then Gen Z. And she argues that changes in technology are the underlying driver of each generation's makeup. That's what she's saying. So she's saying the kind of technology that they lived with is a huge part of how they are, who they are. So when talking about, this generation, she says the best thing about the internet is that we have access to endless information. And the worst thing about the internet is that we have access to endless information, right? It's a double-edged sword. We are spending so much time taking in information all around us, our brains simply cannot keep up. We are constantly working to take in, process, categorize, understand, and make connections with what we're seeing all the time, and it's exhausting. Plus, we now have issues that many of the technologies that are being created are specifically designed to grab our attention, to make us jump from thing to thing to thing. It's not just the information, it's actually the way that it's designed to make us go, oh, duk, 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 and pop all around the screen constantly and want to click on things and want to read new things. it really interrupts our ability as people to do deep work and deep thinking. Not only that, but we have more information now than ever about anything. What career options should you choose? What path should you consider? How should you parent? What are all the terrible ways that your kids could get hurt? Despite the fact that our world is actually physically, and I'm speaking as someone who studies history, our world is actually physically safer right now than it has been throughout history, right? When you think about the types of things, war, famine, disease, we actually are in a very physically safe time. But we have so much information about the types of horrible things that could happen to our kids that we think we actually are living in a culture of safetyism where people are more protective of their kids in the physical world than they have been in the past, and more restrictive than they have been in the past, even though it's actually a safer world in person. And it's because we just know so much. And we hear about that horrible story that happened in the States or that horrible thing that happened over there, and it makes us so fearful, which makes total sense. So I could go on, but the summary of this is the information overload has lots of effects on our brains, and it's really led to an increase in anxiety and stress, attention fragmentation, safetyism in parenting, etc. And I was thinking about a personal story. I mean, I feel like I get stuck in this all the time. I love to research. I love it. I love to find answers. I love to research and write. Preparing this sermon, I just was getting stuck in finding the best, most up-to-date quotes. And Randall was like, does that matter? He's right, it doesn't, right? I mean, and I can get really stuck in that and stuck in finding the information. And I could always find more. There's always more. Like, you have to stop at some point and just say, what's the point of this? And where am I just going to say, okay, what's the purpose, and where do I need to just shut my brain and stop? So I'm going to talk a little bit about social media. Social media is a big part of this overload, but it has a lot of other negative effects on people too. So a 2023 study in the U.S., that was one of the more recent ones I found, showed that the average teen is spending more than 7 hours a day on screen-based leisure activities. So we know that screens are part of education as well, with a lot of benefits. But teens are using them, social media and screens, a lot for leisure activities. And a big thing that's come from our social media usage is attention fragmentation. So the habit of just constantly flicking from thing to thing to thing, right? Some of the negative effects of the way we are spending so much time on social media include a reduced ability to concentrate, reduced ability to determine what's relevant. We can't tell anymore what matters, right? We used to be able to tell students, thinking about this from a teacher perspective, well, just find the source and you'll know if it's true or not. Now there's so much out there, you can't always tell if it's true. There's a lot of good information out there that is actually not good, but looks true, and it's really hard to tell. This was a book that was written in 2010 about somebody who was starting to kind of think about the internet and what it was doing to our brains. He said, once I was a scuba diver in a sea of words, now I zip along the surface like a guy on a jet ski. So like we can't actually engage, right? We're just popping around, taking in little bits and pieces all the time. A quote that I have from The Anxious Generation. So attention is a choice we make to stay on one task, one line of thinking, one mental road, even as attractive off-ramps beckon. When we fail to make that choice and allow ourselves to be frequently sidetracked, we end up confused, dazed, and in a scatterbrained state that's the opposite of attention. So social media really impacts this because of the way it's built. It's built in a way to really make our attention jump all over the place. Not only that, social media is also designed to stir up emotion, create division, and surround you with people who think similarly to you, which can be a great tool when you think about when you go through something hard and you can find other people across the world who are experiencing that hard thing too and connect with them, huge. Right? When you want to have a way to connect with your community and talk to them about issues that impact all of you. Social media is fantastic for that. But it also is designed to make us have strong feelings and to find other people who have those strong feelings the same way and then get us even more worked up. An article I found written by Jonathan Haidt, he actually traced back when the share and retweet buttons were added to Facebook and Twitter in the early 2010s. And he has made a connection between when those buttons, so the ability to share something or retweet it or throw it out there, that can be traced back to the beginnings of some of the significant polarization and anger that we see on social media. So once you're able to share stuff and say, I want to make other people think about these things that I'm feeling strongly about, is when we started to have more and more issues with people just really, really struggling with being, having really strong feelings that they wanted to kind of share via social media. So, my goal of this section was to convince you that constant connectivity has created a society where peace is really hard. This is obviously just one part of what makes anxiety prevalent and peace elusive. And I'm just focusing on this today. But I just wanted to paint the picture that if you're feeling anxious or struggling for peace, you are not alone. And we are living in a society where it is really, really hard to find that. So, I want to encourage you now to think about the fact that while the world really is louder than ever, the Christmas season can be a time to practice a countercultural peace. We really need to practice intentional peace and rest, and quite frankly, give our brains a break. So, how to connect this to Philippians. This all started because Philippians 4:4-7 is one of the passages in the lectionary for today. So when I was looking at that and realized that this is something that has been, this is a passage that is connected to December 15th, and I thought, well, why are we talking about peace and anxiety 2 weeks before Christmas? I think it's because a lot of people do feel quite anxious at this time of year. And then I connected it to the screens and the information because of what I'm seeing in my job right now and in my role. But I really want us to think about some of the anxiety that surrounds us at this time of the year and what we maybe can do about it. So, Philippians 4:4-7. I'm going to read just this part here. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again. Rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. So, this passage is Paul's response to anxiety. His encouragement, and some of the words he uses here, rejoicing, gentleness, prayer, and thanksgiving, is a guide for finding peace, regardless of whatever external chaos you find yourself in. As far as some historical context, Paul was writing this to the Philippians who lived in the city of Philippi, likely between 60 to 64 AD, 60 to 64 after Jesus' death, Jesus being, born in 0. Philippi was a Roman colony in ancient Macedonia. It was full of retired soldiers. It was well known for being a very Roman, patriotic place. So, Paul definitely would face lots of resistance for announcing Jesus as the true king of the world in that place. This would be a place that had lots of people who were very, very, very pro-Roman Empire. The church in Philippi was the first Jesus community that Paul started in Eastern Europe. And he's writing to them and saying, do not be anxious about anything. So what was he referring to? What would the people at this time have to be anxious about? If you didn't have the internet, surely there'd be nothing to be anxious about, right? The ancient world was full of death, Disease, turmoil, starvation, no security. Life was full of anxieties. This is my issue, this led me down a deep dive of disease at this time. And I started trying to make a list of all the different diseases. It's not the point. But there was lots. Not a lot of medicine. Even though the Romans were actually quite advanced as far as medicine, they still didn't have a lot of medical care for things. So the Roman Empire grew and expanded rapidly at this time. The population grew. Cities became really dense and populated, and that meant that people were living together and sharing more and more disease. Influenza, colds, STDs, something called black lung disease, which sounds really bad, were really big at this time. So there was lots of things going on that made people anxious. So how does Paul, through this verse, encourage the Philippians to combat this anxiety? Oh, sorry, I'm getting behind there. Okay. I'm going to propose 3 different practices that he brings up in this passage. So first, rejoicing as an act of resistance. In a world focused on fear and anxiety, Paul's command to rejoice challenges us to focus on God's goodness. So what does that mean? What does it mean to focus on God's goodness, and why is God good? So the obvious answer is, well, he sent Jesus to earth. That was a pretty good thing that he did. He gives us moments of joy. He gives us lots of blessings. We often aren't aware of the blessings he gives us. And we often don't reflect on the blessings, right? And another word for that would be gratitude. We don't often intentionally find that gratitude. But being aware of what you've been given, intentionally trying to be aware of what you have, is a huge factor in relieving anxiety, right? It is so easy to focus on the things that are not going well, the problems, but really taking the time to think about what you do have is a huge way to kind of get outside of yourself and think about, be appreciative for what you have. And when I connected it to the word gratitude, I thought, well, I mean, gratitude practices have become hugely popular in the world, not the Christian world, right? People all over the place are finding ways to gratitude journals, gratitude practices, being thankful. This is something that helps us so much. And as Christians, we want to be thankful to God for what it is that he's given us. So when you're anxious, it's natural to want to focus or narrow your concerns on just what's in front of you, but gratitude really offers a new perspective to be thankful for what God has given you. I was going to go into a practical application, but I'm going to keep moving. A second practice, choosing solitude over screen time. So I hope I've made a convincing case for why the constant noise that we're all surrounded by can make it really hard for us to be calm and find peace. I ended up finding out the root of the word doom scrolling. Who's heard of that word before, doom scrolling? Right. So it just popped up 5 years ago during the pandemic. That's when it became a word, because people would just, right, as we were waiting for information, waiting to know what was going to happen next, people would just scroll. It's maybe if I just keep looking, I'll find something better. Oh, nope, more bad news. I'll keep looking. Nope, still bad news. Oh, schools are closed again. It just was constant, right? And so that's become a habit that we go onto our screens to find more information, and it generally doesn't make us feel better. Sometimes it can. But if you're in a place of not feeling good and then you go to your phone to feel better, it's often going to end up just bringing more things that aren't making you feel positive about the world. So, choosing solitude. Solitude does not have to mean all by yourself or alone. I would make the point that, being intentionally detached from a screen right now is a way of choosing solitude. Because we are all so attached all the time, and we have to be for our jobs, for school. We have to be. So intentionally taking some time away from a screen is choosing solitude. Cal Newport wrote a book called Digital Minimalism, where he advocates for intentional high-quality screen time and intentional solitude from screens and information. He defines digital minimalism as a philosophy of technology use in which you focus your online time on a small number of carefully selected and optimized activities that strongly support things you value and then happily miss out on everything else. So not no screens, that's not realistic, right? But intentional. Just be intentional about it. Just think about what you need it for and what you don't, when you will and when you won't. Keep resetting, keep giving yourself breaks. Andy Crouch is a Christian author, a very influential Christian author and scholar, and he wrote a book called The Tech-Wise Family. He says if we don't learn to put technology in all its forms in its proper place, we will miss out on many of the best parts of life as a family. So he has a bunch of commitments in his book because he writes it for a family who wants to try to decrease their screen time in general or just be more conscious and mindful about it. He says, create more than consume. So put things out into the world rather than just consuming what other people put out into the world. Do the thing, make the thing, write the thing, create the thing, do the practice. Designing a rhythm of work and rest. So having some type of a rhythm to your screen and not screen time. Using screens for a purpose and trying to be fully present in the big events of life. Those are some of the commitments that he encourages in his book. Both of these quotes are pretty lofty. Only being online for activities that matter to you. Never just picking up your phone because your kids are screaming and you're done and you just need to detach. I did that last night. Went and laid in my bed and turned on the news. Didn't make me feel better. News wasn't encouraging, but that's what I had on my phone. It's very aspirational, so I just want to acknowledge that. And it's never going to be a one-and-done situation. But that's where I think the Bible can be so encouraging. I mean, we have a whole book written to encourage us to just keep trying. God does not expect us to be, you know what, I'm going to just detach from my screens and I'm going to be fine. Nope, got to do it again tomorrow and make that choice again the next day and again the next day, right? We are never going to get it. We are people, but we have to just keep trying to make those choices to connect with God and to do the thing that we know is going to ultimately help us feel better and feel more connected. So the third practice is seeking God's presence in the present moment. Just give me one sec. So this is the gospel piece. This is Gavin's quote when I talked to him about my sermon. So I have it in italics. This is Gavin's quote. This is the gospel piece. This is the hope and the good news that we can rely on. So God is ultimately our peace. He is a constant source of peace if we can continue to remember to go to him. Christmas, like I said, can be a really anxious time for people. It brings up all kinds of things. Good things. Busyness. Busyness can be good. Doing all the things can be good. It can be fun, fulfilling. It can also be stressful. There can also be a lot of pressure. People have significant expectations. Family has expectations. Friends have expectations. Your school has expectations. If you have kids, the school has a lot of expectations of things we need to make sure we're doing. Your work probably has things you need to do. There's so many things that we're supposed to do, and they're good things. Like, they're generally all good things. But there's just a lot. At the same time, Christmas can bring up grief, loneliness, relational conflict, challenging conversations. How many of you have had a Christmas dinner go south with a challenging conversation? I can think of one I had a couple years ago that did not end that Christmas day well. So looking at the verse, before Paul says, do not be anxious about anything, he says, the Lord is near. A lot of times we don't take that. We just take, do not be anxious about anything. Okay, great. Thanks, Paul. I won't be anxious. But why? Because the Lord is near. God's peace is always accessible if we slow down to receive it. I'm not switching yet. Another book by a Christian author, John Mark Comer. He wrote a book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. He argues in his book that the frenetic pace and busyness of our current modern life is incompatible with the way of Jesus. So he pretty much says, if we're going to live this really, really busy, overscheduled life, it's pretty much impossible to really get that deep peace of Jesus. He talks about spiritual emptiness, anxiety, and disconnection being a result of the busyness of life. So he really encourages readers to embrace a lifestyle of simplicity, Sabbath, and slowed living to cultivate intimacy with God and experience genuine peace. The last chapter of his book is actually called Slowing, and in it he talks about how some other big Christian authors and thinkers like John Ortberg and Richard Foster have in times been writing about an emerging spiritual discipline or practice called slowing. So actually one thing we need to do to intentionally connect with God is slow down. It is really, really hard to find that peace and connection when we're just trying to squeeze it in 1 minute before the kids wake up, or do it in the evening before you fall asleep. It's really hard. And I mean, it's, and I'm not saying this like, so you just got to get up earlier because then it'll be fine. There's really no magic answer. It's an important thing that we have to consider, that it's just really hard to find that intimate connection with God when we're always moving so fast. It's just hard. There's the quote. So in this definition of slowing as a spiritual practice, Ortberg defined it as cultivating patience by deliberately choosing to place ourselves in positions where we simply have to wait. If we can slow down the pace at which we think and the pace at which we move our bodies through the world, maybe we can slow down our souls to a place at which they can taste and see the Lord is good. I think I have that next. Yeah, that's that quote there from this book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. I'm going to say that again. If we can slow down the pace at which we think and the pace at which we move our bodies through the world, then maybe we can slow down our souls enough to a place where we can taste and see the Lord is good. That speaks to me so much. I feel like there is a guinea pig inside my brain, or a hamster. It's hamster that runs around fast, right? Like, I cannot stop the constant tick, 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 all the things I got to do, right? It's so hard to find that genuine peace. So we can have peace when we slow and remember that God is there. We're not hopeless. It's a practice to continuously go to God. So to relate this back to the information you consume and the time you spend on screens, just think about the fact that if you want to experience that intimacy with God, slowing yourself down, intentionally disconnecting, and surrounding yourself by things that remind you that God is near should help. So in conclusion, thank you so much for your patience. I know I've gone a bit long, and participation today. I love teaching for lots of reasons, but one of the reasons is because it forces me to be able to read and research and learn. So thank you for the opportunity to engage in this material so that I can incorporate some of it into my life. I also encourage you to not be like me and take this message as another challenge to just do better. I just had somebody in my life tell me yesterday that I should not consider something I didn't do yet for Christmas as, quote unquote, a failure. It was Randall. Because I was like, well, I haven't done XYZ yet, so I failed. And he's like, that doesn't make sense. So don't be like me and take this as, well, because I don't do all the things, or because I do spend a lot of time on my phone, or because I do have all the... It doesn't mean you're a failure. Take a breath and remember that the Lord is near. He's near, right? He wants to give us holy peace, and he wants us to continuously go to him again and again. So my challenge for you this Christmas season is to find small ways to practice gratitude, find intentional times to detach from screens, and seek God's presence for a true peace that will guard you from anxiety. I want to close in prayer. God, we come before you in awe of your goodness and faithfulness, rejoicing in the nearness of your presence. In a world that is overwhelmed by noise, anxiety, and distractions, we thank you for the peace that surpasses all understanding, a peace that guards our hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Help us to live out the practices of rejoicing, gentleness, gratitude, and prayer as we navigate the challenges of this season and beyond. Teach us to embrace solitude, to slow down, and to seek you in the present moment. May we surrender our worries to you, trusting in your care and provision. Lord, we ask you for your Spirit to guide us as we leave this place, carrying your peace into our homes, workplaces, and communities. Let the light of your love shine through us, drawing others to the hope and the rest only found in you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.